Power is never innocent. It does not move in straight lines, it does not follow the rules of honesty, and it certainly does not wait for morality to approve. Power flows like water into cracks, exploiting every weakness, reshaping every surface it touches. And the ones who wield it well are not the saints we imagine, but the manipulators, the rulers who understand the invisible strings that pull human behavior. This is the dark psychology of the prince. Not the polite advice of philosophers, but the raw anatomy of manipulation. Niccolo Machiavelli did not waste ink on moral fables. He did not write for dreamers. He wrote for survivors, for those caught in the storm of betrayal and ambition, for those who understood that kindness alone is a currency that devalues quickly. And in his words lies a dangerous but undeniable lesson. To rule is to manipulate, and to manipulate is to live in truth, not as the world pretends it is, but as it actually functions. You see, manipulation is not the grotesque caricature most people imagine. It is not simply lying or deceiving for pleasure. It is the ability to shape perception, to plant seeds in the minds of others, to orchestrate behavior without brute force. It is subtle, patient, invisible. A ruler who uses only fear is a tyrant. A ruler who uses only love is a fool. But a ruler who uses manipulation, who bends appearances, calibrates fear, distributes hope when useful, and withholds it when necessary, that ruler becomes untouchable. Let us strip away the illusions. Every relationship you have ever had contains manipulation. When you speak gently to persuade, you are manipulating. When you hide anger to maintain peace, you are manipulating. When you present the best version of yourself on a date, at a job interview online, you are manipulating. You may not call it that. You may prefer softer words, influence, persuasion, charm. But the core is the same. You are shaping reality in someone else's mind. The only difference between you and the prince is that he does it consciously, deliberately, relentlessly. And this is where psychology collides with philosophy. Because human beings, for all their songs about love and morality, are astonishingly predictable. We crave safety. We fear exclusion. We bend to authority. We are dazzled by appearances. And we are loyal only as long as it serves us. Machiavelli's genius was not in inventing manipulation, but in exposing how easy it is, how inevitable it is, and how rulers must wield it if they wish to survive. Consider appearances. Machiavelli wrote that it is not necessary for a prince to truly have all the virtues, kindness, honesty, generosity, but it is necessary to appear to have them. Why? Because human beings are not searching for truth, they are searching for comfort. They want to believe their leader is virtuous, even if the reality is cruelty hidden beneath the surface. The psychology is simple. Perception is stronger than truth. The ruler who understands this does not waste time on purity. He masters masks. Think about it in your own life. How many times have you maintained an image, on social media, in front of friends, in front of family, that was not fully real? How many times have you concealed your flaws and performed a version of yourself designed to win approval? That is the psychology of manipulation, and you already practice it. The difference is that you do it unconsciously, while rulers, manipulators, princes do it strategically. And appearances alone are not enough. A mask without consequence is a costume. What makes manipulation powerful is its connection to fear. People do not follow masks alone. They follow masks backed by force. The ruler appears merciful, but behind the performance is the knowledge that punishment will follow betrayal. The ruler appears generous, but behind the performance is the understanding that disloyalty will cost more than loyalty. Manipulation without enforcement is fragile. Manipulation with consequence is unbreakable. This is why Machiavelli argued that cruelty, when used, must be swift and decisive, so that it shocks the mind into submission. It is not cruelty for its own sake. It is psychology. The brain remembers pain more vividly than kindness. A single harsh act, well calculated, will echo longer in memory than 100 mercies. The ruler knows this. The manipulator knows this. Do you? Here is the uncomfortable truth. You have been manipulated your entire life. By parents who withheld affection until you obeyed. By teachers who rewarded conformity more than creativity. By companies who engineered advertisements to exploit your fears and desires. By governments who dressed control in the language of safety. You think manipulation is rare, when in fact, it is the air you breathe. The only question is whether you remain unconscious of it, or whether you learn to see it and perhaps to use it. But here is the darker twist. Manipulation is not evil. It is neutral. Like a knife, it can be used to cut bread or to cut flesh. The one who manipulates may be cruel, but they may also be wise. A ruler who manipulates his people into unity may preserve them from destruction. A leader who manipulates enemies into hesitation may prevent bloodshed. A parent who manipulates a child into discipline may protect them from chaos. The morality of manipulation is not in the act, it is in the intent. But power does not care about morality. Power cares only about effectiveness. And so the question becomes not whether manipulation is good or bad, but whether you can afford not to use it. Can you survive in a world where everyone manipulates you, but you refuse to see it? Can you endure a battlefield where your enemies use appearances and fear while you cling to honesty and morality? Or will you be swallowed whole by those who play the game you refuse to learn? You may resist this thought. You may want to believe in sincerity, in authenticity, in some sacred space where manipulation does not exist. But search your memory. Has your sincerity ever been used against you? Has your honesty ever been punished? Has your vulnerability ever been exploited? Then you already know the cost of refusing to play the game. Machiavelli's brilliance was not in cruelty, but in clarity. He stripped away illusions and told rulers, if you want to survive, you must manipulate. Not always, not unnecessarily, but strategically. And this is the dark psychology of the prince, to see others not as they claim to be but as they are, creatures of fear, vanity, self-interest, desire, to shape their reality without revealing your hand, to wear masks so convincing that no one dares to question what lies beneath. And now I ask you, what mask do you wear? What stage are you performing on? Do you believe you are free of manipulation, or do you recognize that every smile, every silence, every gesture is part of the theater? Comment your answer, if you dare, because admitting it means tearing down illusions. Subscribe if you crave more of this dark clarity. Share this with someone still trapped in the fantasy that honesty alone wins power, and watch how they react when the mask slips. Because the prince's secret is not about cruelty, it is about control. And control is never given freely. It is taken, shaped, manufactured, manipulated. And this is only the beginning. In the next part, we will go deeper into the specific strategies of manipulation Machiavelli described, how to appear generous without being weakened, how to inspire loyalty without trust, how to wield cruelty without being hated. You will see that the art of ruling is not brute force but psychological mastery, and once you understand it, you will see the game everywhere. The prince manipulates not because he is evil, but because it is the only way to survive. The only question left is whether you will remain the pawn or learn to become the player. To manipulate like a ruler is not to lie recklessly or deceive blindly. It is to understand the psychological levers that move people, to push them with precision, never with waste. Machiavelli did not advocate chaos. He advocated strategy. His insights were not born of abstract theory but of blood-soaked reality. And if you read carefully, you find a catalog of manipulative techniques so sharp they could carve through centuries. These are not relics of Renaissance politics. They are living tools, used today in boardrooms, governments, relationships, and digital screens. The first is the mask of virtue. Machiavelli wrote that a ruler must learn to appear merciful, Faithful, humane, religious, and upright, but be ready to act in the opposite way when necessity demands it. Why? Because people judge with their eyes more than with their minds. They want to see a leader who reflects their ideals, not one who embodies reality. So the prince crafts an illusion, a mask of kindness, honesty, generosity, humility. The crowd applauds the performance, never realizing the theater is a shield behind which necessity operates. Think of modern leaders, smiles on camera, charities, speeches about compassion. While behind the curtain, decisions are made with ruthless calculation. The mask is not hypocrisy, it is survival. Because if people see you as cruel, they hate you. If they see you as deceptive, they distrust you. But if they see you as virtuous, they forgive your sins, even when they are obvious. A single image of kindness can outweigh 10 hidden acts of cruelty. The psychology is simple. Appearances soothe, appearances distract, appearances manipulate. The second strategy is the economy of cruelty. Machiavelli observed that cruelty, when used, must be swift, decisive, and sparing. A ruler who punishes endlessly breeds hatred. But a ruler who delivers one sharp blow establishes fear that endures without constant violence. This is manipulation at its most primal. The brain is wired to remember pain. A sudden, calculated act of cruelty imprints itself on memory more deeply than repeated acts of kindness. Think of how parents discipline a child. A single punishment, shocking and clear, often does more than 100 gentle warnings. Think of governments. One public trial, one execution, one example, sufficient to make thousands obey without question. This is not sadism, it is efficiency. Too much cruelty breaks the machine. Too little cruelty leaves it uncontrollable. The manipulator understands the dose, the timing, the theater of punishment. The third is controlled generosity. Generosity seems a virtue, but Machiavelli warned, constant generosity drains resources and breeds entitlement. The ruler who gives too much becomes despised when he cannot give more. But the ruler who gives rarely, strategically, in moments when gratitude matters most, he wins loyalty without impoverishing himself. This is manipulation through scarcity. People value what is rare more than what is constant. A gift given once in crisis is remembered longer than daily indulgence. You see this today in business. Discounts and bonuses are not constant, but timed to create desire. In relationships, affection withheld, then delivered with precision, feels more powerful than constant smothering. This is the psychology of intermittent reward, the same principle casinos use to enslave gamblers. The manipulator knows when to give, when to withhold, when to let desire ferment into desperation. The fourth is the crafting of enemies. Machiavelli observed that a ruler without enemies appears weak. Enemies create unity. They give the crowd someone to blame, someone to fear, someone to fight against. A ruler can manipulate loyalty by pointing outward, by directing resentment away from himself. This is one of the darkest manipulations. Divide, then rule. Create a common enemy, and people forget their private grievances. History is littered with this strategy. Leaders ignite wars not only to conquer land, but to unite their people under fear. Politicians manufacture crises to distract from corruption. Even in your personal life, someone may pit you against a rival just to secure your loyalty. The enemy is often a mirror, a tool, a stage prop in the theater of manipulation, and most people never notice they are being directed. The fifth is mastery of narrative. Machiavelli knew that words shape reality as much as swords. To control what people believe, you must control the story. Appearances alone are fragile unless supported by narrative. This is why rulers fund poets, playwrights, preachers, voices that spin the mask into myth. Today it is media, influencers, endless noise that repeats the chosen story until it becomes unquestioned truth. And here lies the psychological core. People do not want raw reality. They want a story that gives meaning to their obedience. They want to believe they are serving justice, peace, progress, even when they are serving only survival. A ruler who manipulates narrative does not need to silence dissent. He makes dissent invisible by drowning it in myth. Now pause for a moment. Reflect. Do these strategies disturb you? They should. But ask yourself, have you seen them used against you? Have you, perhaps, even used them yourself without realizing? Have you worn the mask to win approval? Delivered cruelty to enforce respect? Controlled generosity to keep someone loyal? Pointed to an enemy to rally allies? Told a story to hide a truth? Then you already know the dark psychology of manipulation is not foreign. It is human. Machiavelli's brilliance was to systematize it, to strip away illusions, to show that rulers survive not by purity, but by precision. And what terrifies people most is not that princes manipulate, it is that they themselves are manipulators, only clumsier, less aware, less strategic. The difference between a victim and a ruler is not morality, but skill. So here is the challenge. Will you remain unaware of the strings that pull you, or will you learn to see them and perhaps to pull them yourself? Comment below. Which of these manipulative strategies have you seen most in your own life? Subscribe if you want to step deeper into this labyrinth. Share this with someone who still clings to illusions of sincerity, and watch them recoil when they realize the game was always being played. Because the prince's psychology is not history, it is a mirror. And when you stare into it, you see not kings and queens but yourself. And yet, this is still not the deepest layer. We have seen the techniques: masks, cruelty, generosity, enemies, narrative. But there is something darker still: the psychology of collapse. What happens when manipulation fails? When masks slip, cruelty breeds hatred, generosity bankrupts, enemies lose credibility, and narratives fall apart? In the final part, we will confront the nightmare every manipulator fears: the end of control. And once you understand that, you will see power itself differently. Not as permanent, not as absolute, but as a fragile illusion, strong only until the people stop believing. And when they do, even the cleverest prince must fall. Stay with me, because the darkest psychology is yet to come. Every mask eventually cracks. Every performance grows thin. Every manipulation, no matter how artful, carries within it the seed of collapse. This is the final truth of the dark psychology of the prince. Power survives on perception, but perception is fragile. It can be bent, stretched, reshaped, but once it shatters, it does not return. The greatest manipulators in history all faced the same end. They mastered appearances, wielded cruelty with precision, told stories that hypnotized entire nations. Yet eventually the mask slipped, the narrative failed, the crowd stopped believing. And when belief dies, manipulation collapses overnight. Why does this happen? Because the psychology of manipulation feeds on two things: ignorance and fear. People obey when they do not know the truth. People submit when they still fear the consequences of rebellion. But ignorance cannot last forever, and fear can only stretch so far. Once people begin to see the trick, once they realize the generosity was calculated, the cruelty was staged, the enemies were manufactured, the narrative was a script, they awaken. And an awakened mind is the one thing no manipulator can fully control. This is why rulers, even the most cunning, eventually fall. They rely too heavily on one tool and it corrodes. Too much cruelty, and fear turns into hatred. Too much generosity, and the treasury collapses. Too many enemies invented, and the lie becomes visible. Too many stories spun, and the people choke on the excess. Manipulation works only in balance, only in secrecy, only while the crowd still prefers the illusion. But illusions decay, and when they do, collapse is violent. Think of it. The tyrant who terrified millions, suddenly reduced to a hunted fugitive. The corporation worshipped as benevolent, exposed as corrupt and collapsing overnight. The lover who controlled with subtle games finally abandoned when their tricks are seen for what they are. All manipulation is a house of mirrors, dazzling, convincing, but fragile. A single crack and the entire structure distorts. Here lies the dark irony. Machiavelli showed us how to manipulate like a ruler, but he also hinted at the inevitable failure of manipulation itself. For though manipulation is powerful, it cannot create truth. It can only distort perception. And perception, once broken, cannot easily be repaired. When people no longer believe the mask, when fear no longer controls them, when the narrative no longer hypnotizes them, the ruler stands naked, and nakedness is death to power. This is why fear itself, once the strongest weapon, becomes the most dangerous weakness. Push it too far, and people stop fearing. Desperation replaces obedience. When hunger outweighs punishment, when suffering outweighs terror, when death itself loses its sting, then the chains of fear dissolve. And in that moment, no manipulation can restrain them. The people who once obeyed will rise, and the ruler who once controlled becomes the victim of his own psychology. And yet, here is the paradox. You cannot live without manipulation either. To abandon it entirely is to walk into a world of wolves without claws. To pretend sincerity alone can win battles is to invite defeat. And so, like fire, manipulation must be used carefully, warmth or destruction depending on the hands that wield it. But let us return to you. Because this is not only about princes, tyrants, or rulers. This is about your life. How much of your identity is a mask? How much of your influence is manipulation, even if you refuse to call it that? And more importantly, how long can you sustain the illusions you maintain? The smiling face at work, the curated persona online, the controlled silence in relationships. These are masks, useful, necessary, manipulative. But sooner or later, cracks appear. Someone sees through you. Someone refuses to play along. And then you face the same crisis every ruler faces, the collapse of control. What do you do then? When your manipulation is exposed, when fear no longer binds, when your mask is seen for what it is. That moment defines not just rulers, but all of us. Some collapse, unable to exist without illusions. Others adapt, shifting quickly, weaving new masks before the crowd can fully awaken. The rarest few walk away entirely, choosing to live without manipulation, to embrace the terrifying freedom of being unmasked. But those are outcasts, saints, or madmen, who no longer belong to the theater of society. And so you must ask yourself, do you want to rule in the theater, or do you want to leave it? Do you want to perfect the art of manipulation, knowing its collapse is always waiting? Or do you want to step beyond, into the silence where no one can control you, but where you can control no one either? This is the ultimate question, darker than Machiavelli dared to write. Not how to manipulate like a ruler, but whether you want to live in the endless game of manipulation at all. Because manipulation is everywhere. Parents, partners, bosses, governments, media, religions, all weave appearances, fears, stories to shape behavior. You are not outside the game. You are inside it. And you have only two choices: remain a pawn, manipulated without knowing, or become a player, manipulating with awareness. The third path, total escape, is rare, costly, perhaps impossible for most. But it exists in the silence beyond masks. So where will you stand? Will you sharpen your mask, perfect your cruelty, balance your generosity, craft your enemies, spin your narratives? Will you become the manipulator rather than the manipulated? Or will you risk everything and step outside the theater altogether, refusing to play the game at all? Comment below which path you would choose if you dare. Subscribe if you want to dive deeper into the hidden mechanics of human psychology. Share this with someone who still clings to the fantasy of sincerity, and watch whether they laugh or whether they rage. The Prince's dark psychology is not a historical curiosity. It is the anatomy of power itself. Learn it, and you will never see the world the same way again. Ignore it, and you will remain forever in someone else's theater. And now the mask is in your hands. What will you do with it?